In this exciting episode, we see a tale as old as time. You're sunbathing without clothes near a golf course when your mobile trailer gets stolen. The same trailer where you're keeping the diary that tracks progress of your investigation into your dad's false robbery conviction. Wait a minute, that's not mundane at all. It's Season 1, Episode 17 of Perry Mason, The Case of the Sunbather's Diary. Welcome to the 17th episode of the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy, and my purpose here is pretty simple. Provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do a pod for every episode of the television series, and, if time permits, to cover some of those made-for-TV movies too. I'll be working through the series in the order in which the episodes were aired. Each week, I'll give a brief refresher on the plot, and if the episode was based on a novel, I'll compare the book with its television adaptation. Next, I'll list some key pieces of trivia, as well as tackle the episode's main theme. We'll feature a Perry proverb, a moment of wisdom from the man himself, and then we'll finish with a post-case water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can rehash the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the law library! Each week in the law library, we return to prior episodes to refresh our memories about Perry's past so we can find fresh precedents for future cases. In our last episode, The Case of the Demure Defendant, we encountered this classic Perry dilemma. A potentially helpful witness who Perry has trapped into confessing something in private. In this case, it was the defendant's brother-in-law, Jackson Newberg.
What are your feelings about John Locke?
He's a nice boy.
How far do you think he'd go to protect her?
Oh, pretty far. I wouldn't be surprised if he was the one that threw that bottle of saccharin in the lake.
How did you know about that other bottle? The police have been keeping it under wraps.
I must be psychic.
It's an oversimplification.
Meaning?
Meaning I think you're responsible for the second bottle.
You know, I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Mason. I don't think I'll ever make that slip again. The next time, I'll keep my mouth shut.
Why did you plant that bottle?
The reason it's worth calling attention to is that Perry has different kinds of leverage he can exert. Outside the courtroom, he can't hang perjury over a potential witness's head. But because it's not on the record, he might get witnesses to spill some evidence that might not be admissible in court. If he tips his hand in private, as he does here, however, he won't have that trump card to play once he gets the witness in court. What's cool about this little subplot in the case of the demure defendant is that Perry has two different kinds of trumps he plays on Newberg. The first is simple foolhardiness on Newbern's part, and he overshares and Perry catches him. And in the second, Perry actually produces evidence, remember the lead shot, that puts Jackson on the spot. Perry doesn't always get to trap a witness twice, but when he does, it's a delight. Now to this week's episode. The Case of the Sunbather's Diary. This episode opens with something that's rare for Perry, a completely wordless scene. We get several more directorial flourishes throughout the episode. Huge crane shots, set locations, and moments of unrestrained wit.
I don't like it, Perry.
No, I'm afraid the photographer didn't capture the real me.
This episode brings together the best elements of the show and teams them with a little stylistic pizzazz. Arlene Dowling is a spunkier version of Evelyn Bagby. The "my father was wrongly accused" plot urbanizes the structure of the case of the drowning duck. George Ballard may be the most affable murder victim we've ever seen.
Yeah, I guess you must think that I'm nuts making a bet like that, but you see, I haven't any family, and, well, gambling is my only vice. Well, that is gambling and a little nip once in a while. Oh, would you like to have a little, yeah?
Love to.
It's as though the show were trying to compensate for the sadistic Uncle Martin from the previous episode. And while we've seen Perry get in hot water with the cops before, we've never seen him have to take the stand. Here we see him not only take the stand, but solve the crime with his own testimony. Here are the facts. Arlene Dowling's father was falsely convicted of robbing a security bank. His daughter is working with her father's old co-worker, George Ballard, to find the guilty party. But a girl can't pursue her convicted father's framers all the time. She has to make time for nature, particularly the sun. And if you can enjoy said sun without clothes, why not? So Arlene is sunbathing when her trailer gets stolen, complete with a diary that records what she's found about her dad's case. This is where Mason comes in, not just to cover her up with clothes, but to help expose the cover-up that's landed her dad in jail.
Hello?
Mr. Mason?
That's right.
My name is Arlene Dowling. I don't know how much your secretary told you.
Just the bare facts.
Soon, George Ballard ends up dead, and Arlene is a suspect. To make things worse, two cops identify Perry as signaling Arlene Dowling with a window shade. A cover-up of another kind.
Doesn't that guy look kind of familiar?
Huh?
The fellow had just left. I know I've seen him somewhere. You notice the way he carried himself? He looked like a guy who could take care of himself.
Could it have been Perry Mason?
Mason? Yeah. This dame's his client. That's who it was, Mason.
Now Perry not only has a client who looks guilty, it looks like he's an accomplice. The shoddy police work that lands Mason in hot water is indicative of how the state tends to handle its evidence. The two cops are following Arlene Dowling, and they hesitate to take down a license plate number of an offending car or compare it with Perry's that would have easily cleared Perry of the crime. Yet they proceed to add 2 and 2 together to come up with 16. The cops don't see Mason's face, they see someone of his build, and they don't bother to check times with Mason's earlier visit to Ballard's home. Mason very easily shoots down the charges once he has the chance to testify.
If the court please. This is an unusual situation. I want to call the attorney for the defense. I realize this is highly irregular. Mr. Mason has already appeared before the grand jury. And although I hate to say so, it's possible that he may be an accessory in this case.
In fact, he's much more able to get at the core of the case from the witness stand than he does when he's serving as an attorney. The real murderer is Bill Emery, the driver of the armored car that held all of the security bank's money. In league with Thomas Sackett, an expert forger and someone who likes to ogle Della, and the nurse of one Dr. Ralph Chandler, who is Arlene Dowling's beau. The men made impressions of the necessary keys and left Arlene's father holding the literal and figurative bag. Perry fingers Emery from the stand. He gets his man.
Helen Rucker and her confederate, Thomas Sackett, made up a dummy sack filled with canceled checks and sealed like the original. They then turned it over with the key for the truck to the only man who could have made the substitution safely. The man who followed me to Ballard's house and killed him. The man Officer Myers saw at the window. His name is Bill Emery.
As always, Hamilton Berger stands with his mouth agape, and Perry ends the episode by volunteering to stuff it with crow.
Well, under the circumstances, the least I can do is to buy your lunch.
All right, if you insist.
I do insist. Amy. One order of crow for the gentleman. He'll eat it here.
Hey, he's paying. The 1955 novel, The Case of the Sunbather's Diary, differs in a few key ways from the television adaptation. 1. It's Paul, not Perry, who tracks down the missing trailer. I bring this up because many times in the series, that is the television series, it seems like Paul is just there to show how good Perry is at being both a lawyer and detective, which leaves Berger and, I guess, Drake as his foils. But in the novel, at least, there's a whole chapter devoted to the brilliant way Paul tracks down the trailer and identifies and trails Thomas Sackett. which makes another difference in the novel more ironic. It's not the cops, but one of Paul Drake's own operatives in the novel that makes the mistake of fingering Perry as a murder accomplice. In the end, the detective recants and Mason gets his man. But this reveal, number 3, is handled differently than the show since in the novel, we never meet Bill Emery. This is despite the fact that, like in the show, he's the murderer. In his place, we have lengthy exchanges with Thomas Sackett and the nurse who's in on the conspiracy. And now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each week in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more, a Della is something about a particular character in the story, and a Perry is something we learn about our main character. Our Paul this time comes from the trusty eyes of Jim Davidson, author of the Perry Mason book. Look closely at the Lincoln Premier, gorgeous car that Dr. Ralph Chandler is driving. It's the same car that Judge Purley drove in the case of the sulky girl. Want proof? It's got the same license plate. So here's this episode's research prompt. What other cars serve double duty in the Perry world? Our Della this episode concerns the romantic couple at the heart of the case of the Sunbather's Diary, Arlene Dowling and Dr. Ralph Chandler. Susan Morrow, the actress who portrayed Arlene, was the older sister of Judith Campbell Exner. Her career was short. 1958, the year this episode first aired, was her last working year, and she has a single 1966 television appearance that was her last as an actress. She died very young at the age of 53 in 1985, and it's a shame because I think she's quite good in this episode.
Looks like you thought of everything.
I like to think so.
You realize, of course, you're ignoring my advice.
Yes.
In which case, I must conclude you have no further use for my services.
Oddly enough, I've come to the same conclusion. Would you mind terribly if I send the $1,500 around to you this afternoon?
I wonder if she was approached about doing more eps given the way that Perry's producers tended to return to the same stable of television actresses. Arlene's love interest is Ralph Chandler, a doctor played by Carl Betts.
Would you be good enough to give us your full name and address, please?
Dr. Ralph Chandler, 723 Bluebell Avenue, Santa Ana.
Betts is best known for the other doctor role he began in 1958, Dr. Alex Stone in The Donna Reed Show. After that show ended, Betts took what he had learned from his brief time on the Perry Mason program and became an attorney himself, Judd for the defense. He even took home an Emmy in 1969 for the role. Our Perry this time concerns Mason's phone number, which we discover is Madison 51190 per the ad that Perry leaves in the newspaper in order to find Arlene's missing trailer.
Wanted, used Biltmore trailer, deluxe model.
We'll pay top dollar for one in excellent condition. Phone Perry Mason, Madison 51190.
Perry, don't lose that number. It may be the only one you want. Our theme this episode is trust. The past couple of weeks, we've looked at Perry's vacillating beliefs in his clients and the world in general. In the case of the fan dancer's horse, he said he was too skeptical. In the case of the demure defendant, he said he suspected everybody. What's intriguing about the case of the Sunbather's Diary is that the skepticism that runs rampant throughout the episode comes from the non-attorney characters. George Ballard tells Arlene not to trust anyone.
In case Mason does get a lead, how's he going to contact you?
Through Ralph, Dr. Chandler.
Kind of like that boy, don't you?
Yes.
If I were you, I'd watch my step, honey.
He wants to help so much.
Why?
I guess it's because of me.
Because of you or because of $400,000? No, don't get mad. You're a mighty pretty girl. But just remember, there's $400,000 floating loose around this town someplace. You got to practice an awful lot of medicine to pick up money like that.
Are you trying to say
I'm just trying to say that you can't trust anyone completely. Not your lawyer, not your doctor, not even me.
Dr. Chandler then tells Arlene not to trust George.
Look, Arlene,
I hope you don't mind my telling you this. I know how you feel about George Ballard.
Well, what is it, Ralph?
Well, I'd hate for you to be disappointed. But if I were you, I wouldn't trust him too far.
And then laid off Mercantile Securities bank truck driver Emery doesn't trust Perry.
You used to work for the Mercantile Security Bank.
Is that what you came out here to talk about?
Mm-hmm. Take it easy.
Take it easy. What do you think I've been doing for the past 10 months? Don't this look like it? You know, hustling suckers is the greatest career in the world. Some days I make as much as $5-6.
Maybe I could help you.
Can you help a guy get a job that's been blacklisted?
Perry's key advice, remember, to Arlene concerns trust.
You told him you were meeting me.
You've got to trust me. No matter what happens, you've got to trust me, understand?
As a lawyer, he hopes his clients trust him, and he definitely needs to rely on his client's integrity. Remember what he tells her in his office early in the episode.
Just one thing. I have an unqualified aversion to being used. If I find it's happening here, I'll throw you to the wolves without the slightest compunction.
That's what will happen if he loses his trust in her. Perry has to learn to trust Arlene as well, and it's as though the characters of this episode grasp the horribly twisted world they live in, one where murders happen and the state prosecutes and convicts the wrong people, including the very people, like Perry, who are trying to help the innocent go free. They have internalized the state's cockeyed skepticism. They deem the innocent guilty and vice versa. Now, it's time for a Perry proverb. I love this final exchange between Perry and Della. Della shows a rare sign of affection when Perry gives away the reward he's been given to Arlene Dowling's father, and Perry responds this way.
My mother always told me to turn the other cheek.
To which Della promptly wipes off the kiss she just planted on Perry's cheek. I suppose that in the first season of the show there was a real will they or won't they dynamic to the Perry-Della relationship that the producers wanted to cultivate. What's great is that this playful knock by Della segues into her defending Perry when Hamilton Berger joins them shortly. The one who really needs to turn the cheek is Hamilton, because goodness knows he's been legally slapped there often enough. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
You know, there is one thing I don't understand. Go on, Paul.
Thanks so much to those of you who gave me feedback on the last episode. My dad sent in this analysis. Quote, I found the Lester and Marion relationship curious. Did Lester throw the decoy bottle into the lake or pond to protect his wife? Or Nadine? What did he mean when he responded to Marion about the situation with Nadine by saying, you don't want to know? When he spilled on the stand, was he manufacturing an alibi for Nadine? Or was he really faithful to Marion per his protests? She was in it for the money, but what about Lester? All brilliantly conceived red herrings to keep one from honing in on Captain Hugo. Brilliant stuff, Dad. The TV episode ups the ante from this dynamic in the novels by making Nadine Marion's younger sister and not just some hanger-on who is competing with Marion for the same inheritance money. And my Aunt Myra sent me an extended take on the theme of debt that I pursued in the case of the demure defendant. She offers this analysis. We have to pay our debt to society, but I also think society owes a debt to all citizens. There's a quote she gives from the Ernest Hemingway novel, The Sun Also Rises, where a character is asked, how did you go bankrupt? And the other character replies, 2 ways, gradually, then suddenly. Thanks so much. As always, I'd love feedback about this particular episode or the podcast in general. Was there something about this week's pod that you'd like to comment on or something that you'd like to correct? And you can leave comments on the pod's website at theperrypod.libsyn.com or email me at theperrypod@gmail.com. You'll find those links in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this pod journey. Join me next time when we answer a question that's long plagued America. Just what is a coquette? We'll find out in the case of the cautious coquette next time on the Perry Pod. Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat.